Dear viewers, very happy to welcome you in this new program, first episode. We have titled Unbiased. The idea is to have it as informal as possible, but at the same time, very sincere discussion about topics of contemporary nature and actually what is happening in India. Not only India alone, but we are also taking up topics that is also discussed with an expert in international governance, human rights, and international law. He has been working on the diplomacy part of these things for a very long time. And also, he's, I would say, one of the finest analysts of many of these issues worldwide. And also, we would also take up issues that's pertaining to Indo-German relationships in special, because we both, the expert and myself, we are in Germany, and so we have been here for almost 2 decades. So that we have a certain understanding that would be also of interest. I'd like to introduce to you, I'm very honored and privileged to introduce you to Mr. Saravanan Ganesan, who is a law graduate, and he is also a master in international governance. And other than his educational skills, I had the great privilege to work with him very closely, and whenever we have the discussions, he has a deep understanding of any of the topics. Is something always fascinated me. So I thought, from my perspective, knowledge is all about sharing, and also it will be good to understand certain issues, because unfortunately today with the social media and many other ways of news reaching the common public, sometimes it's very misleading. So this is a very, very humble attempt to try to set right the facts, and also at the same time understand what exactly is happening. Mr. Saravanan Ganesan, very warm welcome to you to this episode. Thank you very much, Saravanan, for being with us, and thanks very much for your time, and thanks for accepting to be a standing expert in this unbiased episode, and we hope to have you for a longer duration in various topics. We will take it up, but as an inaugural episode, today we want to discuss with you on the Indo-China Standoff, which has been, let's say in the last months, have been very much in the media, both in India, but also worldwide. But before going into the episode itself, I have few things to clarify also to the viewers and for you. It will be a very free-flowing discussion, and it will be more like a dialogue. I would say it's not. I would not say it's an interview or it's something like that. It's a very, very much a dialogue, so that when there are certain points you think probably it's important to raise, you please do it. And also I can pick up some of the points while you are talking about, so that we can also use that. Yes. And second, I would like to inform the viewers that this has no political bias in any way. We are both of us not belonging to any party, so that in India, so that it is not something in this topic. It's not something directed to any organization or any political party or any individual. It is just for us to understand and also tell what exactly is it's all about. That's all we want to take into that at this point of time. Saravanan, let's start with a very, very basic question. What is this all about actually? Because this has been dominating the headlines for a long time, and it's not only about long time in the sense in the last month has been every single day, and it's not only in Indian newspapers, but we have also seen in German newspapers, world newspapers and media and everywhere. Can you plus, let's say, give first some idea about what is this all about standoff, and so that we can take it up from there, please.
Yeah, Bala, thank you, Bala, for providing me this opportunity. What is this about? What is this standoff about? What is going on there? I observe from the history of incidents, and I back from the colonial period, the border between India and China has never been demarcated. So it was always ambiguous in nature, ambigual in nature. There was never a kind of clear demarcation either during the British period or after the post-independence period of India. So this has created a space of ambiguity between both the countries. Like India and China, they always claim and counterclaims their boundary issues, boundary aspects. Even though I would say if you deeply analyze this into another aspect of security, China want to show its assertiveness in the region, in the Asian region, to show that it's a kind of a evolving power. It deserves some kind of respect from other countries. We have this opinion that India is also an emerging power in Asia. So to counterbalance that effect, China is also like wants to exhibit that no, we are the evolving regional hegemony. But this is a kind of realist attitude to a realist explanation of Chinese behavior, cooperation between China and India, the trade exports. You know that China is an important trade partner. India is a member of Shanghai Cooperation of Countries. India is also with the BRICS. India and China both are present in BRICS. So there is a kind of friendly cooperation between India and China. But on the other hand, if you analyze the growing assertiveness of Chinese foreign policy, especially in Western countries, their assertiveness in the foreign policy has raised alarms in the Western countries. So China wants to demonstrate its power as a regional hegemony.
Right. So yes. So basically, as you are saying that one is to ascertain that we are the power, and so it should be seen. And the second very valid point you have said is that actually there is this demarcation is not very clear. So it's very arbitrary, and each claim that this is the demarcated territory.
Yeah.
How far, let's say, India has taken the whole things into that situation, or how far the media has reacted, and also the political establishment within India, whether they have unitedly has come together as a nation, or do you see there are very different views how to deal with the situation?
Colonial past in the struggle for independence, the country united under Mahatma Gandhi and other various national leaders to fight against the colonial power and secure independence for our country. So in that aspect, if it comes to the country, the nation unites. For example, the whole nation united to support our soldiers to fight against the intruders. So it is if it comes to the nation, of course the country unites. But what I feel as a kind of a normal lay person, the country failed to inform the people about the real situation. For example, okay, you cannot disclose all the military secrets or military positions. You should that we don't want. But you should simply the country should inform the people where we stand, where the Chinese stand, when the Chinese intrude, when we reacted to that. So these kind of basic information should reach the people. People should know the real facts. And what I observe after you spoke about this topic, I have made some research in the Sino-India standoff. So there is a kind of similar situation in 1962. So I draw a kind of a lot of similarities. I don't know whether it is a coincidence or is a historical happening. Like 1962 skirmish, if you remember, it is also started like this: boundary issues, skirmishes between PLA and Indian forces, and there were deaths on both sides, and then there were a lot of misunderstanding between both the sides. There was a communication gap. I've seen many articles on these things that the Chinese side couldn't interpret the Indian intention, and the Indian side also couldn't interpret the Chinese intention. So there was a kind of cultural lack of a cultural understanding between the two cultures, and the understanding of each other intentions was missing around that period. And then after that, in 1962, there was a huge Cuba crisis, you might be knowing. So Cuba crisis, both the USSR and the USA and the whole Western world were involved in that, and there were the Sino-India standoff was merely a kind of small incident in comparing to that Cuba crisis. So now we face the COVID pandemic crisis, and the Western countries, they are busy in fighting with that thing. And in front of that, this crisis is like not much more than fighting of COVID. And then we have a kind of...
Saravanan, just one point. I think you, if I rightly understood, are you saying that it's a very calculated action from the other side?
Yeah, that's why
you say the similarity.
My analysis are going like this. Like, see, there is one more thing. 1961, annexation of liberation of Goa, which does not drew any kind of good appreciation from Western countries, especially USA. They were against the annexation, liberation of Goa. So likewise, we have last year, you might have been knowing 370 abrogation of status to Jammu and Kashmir, and then CAA. There were a lot of protests going on, and the Western countries, the USA, Senate, and the Democratic Party, they have expressed displeasure over India's move. And some of the countries, okay, they have not openly criticized India, but they have relatively in a softer voice expressed their displeasure of these measures by the Indian government. So it is like 1961 liberation of Goa, and we have this Kashmir thing, and then 1962 Cuba crisis, and we have a 2020 COVID crisis. Preliminary incidents, the preliminary skirmishes between Chinese forces and the Indian forces are also the same pattern. Like it all depends upon the assertiveness of Indian side too, because Chinese government always analyzes the weaknesses first. They think the abrogation of status to the Jammu and Kashmir has alienated India from the international community. That is their assumption. And then the CAA protest has like weakened the central government. I mean, the current central government. So they are in a situation like they have been alienated from the international community. I mean, more kind of informal warmth coming from India has been seen as a sign of weakness by Chinese side. They want to demonstrate their power, and of course the growing proximity between US and India, that also alarmed because of their moving away from USA. So it has also created a kind of warning signal.
Last point what you made, I think it's very significant, where you said that USA is trying to use the situation, or observing the situation carefully and trying to, let's say, use its own problems with China, and telling, look, we are having our problems, you are also having our problems, so we should partner more, let's say.
Yeah.
On the other side, there are two incidents where what would be your analysis in terms of how Indian leadership, whoever might be, how to react? Once, when the former Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, when he went to Pakistan and he, showed the very, friendship of India, and then he came back, and then we had the war at that point of time. People said you gave your hand, but for that what we have. And now, current leadership, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, he invited the Chinese president and gave a very warmth, and he showed the culture and everything, and then you have this on the back. So I'm just thinking it's also somehow a coincidence, or one has to be, you cannot take it for granted actually that, these kind of friendship that you are genuinely when you are also giving, but they are on the other side, they have their own plans. Is it so?
Bala, honestly, there is no friendship in the international relations. So all are acting on their national interests only. So there is no kind of permanent enemy or no permanent friendship between countries. And other thing is, if you see the history, 1962 war. After the 1962 war, the relationship between China and Pakistan grew rapidly. So it means enemy of my enemy is my friend. It is always a kind of China-Pakistan relationship rather than India-China relationship or India-Pakistan relationship. So it is very naive, I would say, to hope that China can be a friend of India, or it won't act against Indian interests. Because if you see the Masood Azhar's designation as terrorist in the United Nations Security Council, how many times China blocked that? If you see the attitude of a relationship between both the countries, China and Pakistan, you cannot hope as a country, as a layman, you cannot see, I don't see any hope that China will not act against India. So it is very naive to think to expect a kind of a warm relationship between India and China. It is like the Pandit Nehru. He also hoped for an Indo-Chinese axis, an Asian axis. The history has told us, or history has showed us how Chinese can be vulnerable to the interests of India.
Right. That's when the current Prime Minister in his second term, actually, he always insists. That was policy, and he said we have to have good neighbors and we have to, have very positive relationships. Then only India can also prosper us. And so I think a lot of initiatives has been taken by Indian government. So in today's world, the threat of war is always there in many places, but actually going to war is somebody I don't think the nation is thinking about, because they all know that what's going to be the consequences. And second, India and China being greatest, in terms of population and market in the whole world, everybody want to do business in terms of with both the countries, and especially China having a big amount of interest in Indian market as well. And India is to an extent depend on the Chinese products, though we say we want to do make in India, we want to be independent of everything recently after this during corona situation and everything. What would be your analysis? How far this business angle and economic angle is still in the mind, and though these are all just threat-making tactics, and we should not take too much serious into it, because not actually serious war situation will not happen, because everybody knows that it is going to be a big danger for both the economies.
Bala, this is an interesting aspect, because the Indian government's position to have a cordial relationship with the neighbors, that comes, from the democratic peace theory. If you see, democratic countries won't involve in or won't indulge in waging war against other countries. So it proves the theory that India is a democratic country, that it won't go for war because of its democratic principles enshrined in the constitution. So from that theory part of view, it is absolutely clear that India has an intention not to have a kind of war situation with its neighbors. But on the other hand, if you see the peace theory or whatever theories you have in the economics of war, for example, it depends upon the nation what you gain from the war. Like if going for a war, waging a war has an economic benefit of that country, then the countries, the states, they tend to wage a war. But what if the peace, if you have established if you are maintaining a peace that costs much than waging a war? It's a kind of calculation between waging a war and establishing a peace. Like if waging a war is cheaper than maintaining a peace, then the countries, they tend to wage war. The government of India, whatever democratic country in the world is, they always want to have a peaceful environment in its neighboring countries, because that reduces the cost of security. These costs can be diverted to other social projects in that country. So for the welfare of the people, social welfare of the people. So instead of spending on security, these countries can divert those funds to other measures. So that is the primary objective of a democratic country, to establish peace and stability with the neighboring countries. Security measures of a country, democratic country like India, it should have a concern on its security measures to protect its border from the country, thereby maintaining a good relationship with China. But on the other hand, if you see the economic dependency, after the independence, we have this mixed economy. And after the opening of market, we gradually picked up with the international motion. But Chinese, they reacted earlier than India, and they gradually picked up the economic development than in India. So this lagging behind of China has given a kind of an advantage to China to have a kind of trade deficit with India. Then they changed the policy and they gradually became one of the economic powers in the world. So that's why it has created a kind of interdependency has created the trade deficit between both the countries. But interdependency is not at all a bad thing. If you see the European Union, for example, the whole of European Union, the process of a European Union itself is a kind of interdependency. This interdependency has created a kind of a peace and stability in Europe. If you see the European Union's has this interdependency has a kind of different set of definition in Asian countries, which concerns more on sovereignty. So interdependency is a kind of being seen as a negative thing in Asian countries, but it is seen as a good positive measure in Europe, especially within the context of European Union.
I'm coming to the next point. How far this whole standoff has attracted the world attention? Whether you clearly said people are very busy with their corona situation in their country, and for them it's not. Whether this whole thing has got any reaction from the world, apart from, of course, the US president has been speaking and telling about it. But other than that, the most important powers actually did think that, okay, it is a bilateral thing, they have to just go about it, we have nothing to do, or we have to be very cautious because both India and China is for us economically very important. And how is this being looked at?
Bala, there are two things. One, US leadership, it has taken a strong stance against Chinese government. That is clear from us. But the European Union is always a kind of ambiguous in nature. Though they have a concern about the growing assertiveness of China, they are highly reluctant to impose any restrictive measures on China. Staunch supporter of liberalism and free trade, European Union cannot impose restrictive measures. That is against its liberal principles. They don't want to antagonize China or marginalize China in this affairs because of the economic dependency. At the same time, they want to contain China. So contain China in that sense, they want to have a kind of uniform multilateral action against China. In that sense, there are some measures being taken by the European Union, collective measures being taken by the European Union, but they have not openly criticized, or they have not openly antagonized China.
Okay, thank you, Saravanan, for that. And another point that comes to my mind is how far the Indian diplomacy, actually the Indian diplomats and the whole diplomacy has worked in terms of dealing with China. We can generally look at it not only at this tough time with the Indo-China standoff, but taking into account, because there has been also other issues, as you rightly mentioned. We had difficulty for the blockade of somebody, to make as a terrorist, or there are technical issues and a lot of things. How far actually our diplomacy has been successful in convincing the world that India is on the right side?
See, here also there are two dimensions in this, which I would say. One is India's reaction towards China on the one hand, and then India's information measures about Chinese activities towards the world community, international community. So there are two dimensions in this. a kind of aggressive diplomacy what Chinese are practicing now. Indian diplomacy is rather soft kind of thing, even closed doors to some extent to discuss. The Indian leadership it has had a closed door meeting with the Chinese presidency in the Mahabalipuram summit also, or even in Wuhan summit also. So there was a closed door diplomacy, and this has been seen, in my opinion, press releases or what the statements made by the Indian side against the Chinese side. It's all very soft stand, I would say. And there was never a kind of assertive, kind of sending a signal to China saying that, no, you cannot do this with us. We never raised voice or never been aggressive or coercive coercive against China. But on the other dimension, informing the world against about the incidents between China and India, India has managed to draw the attention of world community, I would say. After seeing India's action, it has triggered some more actions in the US side also, and it has also given some kind of impetus in the European Union side also. So I think in that way, Indian diplomacy has done a good job in informing the world community to raise awareness or to raise concerns against this Chinese activities. But on the other side, from the bilateral view, we have always been seen as a weak partner by Chinese side. It's not a kind of like you say in German, Augenhöhe. We've never considered as an equal partner. We've been relatively seen as a weak partner in the bilateral setup between India and China.
Coming to the public, how is the public actually absorbing the whole thing? If something happens with Pakistan, obviously because of its own history and many things, people come to the street and they everybody say we should stop this, we should not do this. But China, when any situation with China comes, the media discusses a bit, and then there was some guidelines, headlines in the papers. But actually, people say, it's something is happening, but not so much emotionally connected to it, or rather, also rationally discussing it on the streets and all things. What has to do with that? It's all about history, and why with one country you have a different kind of thing, but with China they see it in a different light.
I would say because of this COVID crisis and the restrictive measures that has the restrictive measures that has prevented people to come on streets and protest against this thing. That is one thing. Okay, the other thing is the media rather focusing on the main issue. I mean, main issue in that sense, what is the real problem between India and China relations? They are focusing only on the border clashes between Indian Army and PLA. So I would say we need to focus on the history. I mean, we need to, now it's time to inform the people about the problem. I mean, what is the root cause of this problem? Why this country's behavior is against against India? Why this country is doing this? I would say, I mean, it has something to do with our Western neighbor also, because they are both working closely in many international platforms and many international organizations, multilateral forums. So, I mean, we need to find the root cause of this problem and to address this. It should be like this is an opportunity for the Indian side to deal the border issues, to close it once for all. So, but it's easily said, but it is the most important aspect of this problem, because without solving this, you cannot move forward, because we have two fronts, East and West. India has two fronts, East and West. So you have to invest heavily on this. So if you are investing heavily on security measures, what about the social projects? What about the development of infrastructure? What about the development of health infrastructure and education and all those things? Where comes the money? We need to solve this. We are in compulsion to solve this thing, not to not to find a kind of ad hoc solution and just to close this and invest more money on security. That doesn't make any sense, or it won't work like this, because after 5 years it may come up.
Okay. So coming to the last few minutes, Saravanan, I would say, would you like to take this last minutes to share some of things which you would like to tell, which was not covered in the last, let's say, 40-45 minutes with respect to this part?
Yeah. Bala, we Indians, most of the Indian people are very like emotional in nature. So whatever it affects the country, the patriotic nature of the people, it comes around, and then the emotional feelings come around, and it tends the people not to think rational. So not rational in that sense. People started saying we have to boycott Chinese products, we have to boycott this, we have to do this, we have to retaliate, we have to use nuclear weapons. I mean, a lot of emotional things comes around instead of going to the root cause and solve the problem. So, and sometimes the leadership also wants that rhetoric to keep the people alive, to keep the problem alive, using we will fight till our last lives, or we will give our lives to defend our territory. This kind of emotional things would be counterproductive instead of leading to a kind of constructive dialogue with that country or with any other countries. So emotional attitude is one of the major hindrance in solving a problem, because domestic problems also shapes the foreign policy. The government's rhetoric is also comes under this way, and it sends a wrong signal to the other party. I mean, in this case, our neighboring country, China. So this has happened in 1962 also. People were emotionally charged, and there were rhetorics from our side, and the people and it led to the kind of instead of being emotional, one has to think rational, because we cannot afford two fronts, one on the east and one on the west. It is also, you should also admit the fact that China is a huge country and a huge economy. So to compete with China, we need resources, like we need social projects, we need huge investments. If we are not stable enough, then we don't get any investments, and we divert our funds only to defense projects, not to our social projects. So in that sense, we ourselves are inhibiting our development and growth.
Saravanan, full talking to you. I think you have much for this talk, and also sharing your a deep analysis, and I think it gives us a glimpse to what it is all about, and also we touched upon few things surrounding that. I think it's very, very, very let's say enlightening to look at it. Of course, one can keep on speaking about for the whole day if we pick up each small threads about it. I think we would have time to speak about individual countries at a later point of time. So thanks a lot, viewers, for this, and the next episode will be soon there, and we would very much look forward to meet you all in an episode, and we will have our standing expert Saravanan will be also taking us through to the next topic. We have not yet decided which one it would be, but certainly something that we will look at, the probably latest one, or also something that have been there for some period of time in the context. So wish you all well, and Saravanan, thank you. See you then soon.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Bala.